Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first Virtual CPD Summer School. It's fantastic to see so many of you here this morning. My name's Charlotte Stevenson, and I'm a Business Development Manager at Cardiff University. Two quick bits of housekeeping before we get going. We've got the chat function available this morning if you want to chat to the team. There's be a few of us available. If you've got any sound problems or you want to tell us any problems, let us know, we can get back to you. And if you've got any questions for Mala, we'll do a 10-minute question session at the end. Type your questions into the Q&A section and I can ask Mala at the end. We're all working from home, so please bear with us if there's any technical problems, comedy talking while on mute, or interruptions from children, animals, persistent delivery drivers, or anything else. That's enough from me. I'm really pleased to introduce this morning Mala Mann, who's a systematic reviewer at Cardiff University. Over to you, Mala.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Let me just start sharing the screen first, and then I will get going. Yes, so please note that this is an introduction to systematic reviews, and it will give you a taster of what it is to do a systematic review and what systematic reviews are all about. So the outline really is, what is a systematic review? Because people still get confused as to what a systematic review is, and basically, why do we need them? what are the misconceptions around systematic reviews? And even after all these years, when systematic reviews have been around for many years, there are still many misconceptions. And lastly, we'll talk about the steps to conducting a systematic review. Okay, so let's start with what is a systematic review. Well, often people get confused as to what a systematic review is in relation to a literature review and then a meta-analysis. So let me just introduce you to the definition of a literature review, which is a summary and interpretation of research findings reported in the literature. But when it comes to a systematic review, the definition here is from the Cochrane Glossary. A systematic review is a review of a clearly formulated question that uses systematic and explicit methods to identify, select, and critically appraise relevant research, and to collect and analyze data from the studies that are included in the review. And in some ways that's quite clear. But then people think, well, what is a systematic review and a meta-analysis? So really, a meta-analysis is only the statistical technique that is used within the systematic review to integrate, to synthesize the results of the included studies. So basically, in few sentences, one could say a systematic review locates, evaluates, and synthesizes all the available literature on a given topic. It's systematic in its identification of the literature. It's explicit in the statements and the objectives and the materials and the methods that it uses, and it's reproducible. And this is a very important feature in a systematic review, that a systematic review is reproducible. It needs to be transparent throughout its methodology, its results, its conclusion. This slide just gives you differences, shows you the differences between a systematic review and a literature review. So one of the things I like to draw your attention to is that first point: systematic approach to a review article is what systematic reviews are all about. But when it comes to literature reviews, it can depend on authors' preferences. And really, in a systematic review, the inclusion-exclusion criteria is determined at the very outset of the systematic review process, whereas a literature review, really, in some ways, you can do, as an author, you can get on with whatever you want to pick as the criteria. And of course, the third point is very important. A systematic review, you need to search a comprehensive set of databases and other information resources. But when it comes to a literature review, you only search, you can only search one database. But I have to mention here that there are lots of very good literature reviews where one has followed the systematic review process and they have searched many, many databases. So really, some of these slides, I'm not going to go through every point because they're quite clear as to what it's about. So, a literature review cannot be replicated, but a systematic review should be able to be replicated. It should be transparent and reproducible. Now, why are systematic reviews important? Well, I'll say they're very important. As a systematic review, you'd think, oh, she would say that, wouldn't she? But systematic reviews helps us to determine what we know in a given topic area. It magnifies knowledge gaps in the literature, and it identified gaps that can be used to shape future research agendas. And at the moment, lots of people are wanting to do systematic reviews and are in the process of doing systematic reviews. Now, systematic reviews are widely considered to be the best source of research evidence. They're essential tools for clinicians. At the moment, especially with COVID-19, throughout the world, there are lots of people doing systematic reviews, looking at looking at different treatments and different therapies and so on. And it's an essential tool for healthcare workers. They're tools, great tools for researchers and consumers. So that means you and I, and for policymakers, so they could, a systematic review could help to change practice and policy. And I've got that last point there, legal profession, because I know in the past, a systematic review that I was involved with nearly 10 years ago now, where High Court in London, their attention was drawn to a systematic review we conducted relating to physical abuse in children. It was relating to fractures in children, and the barrister in the court, his attention was drawn to a systematic review where there was the evidence clearly laid out that, even the legal profession are finding systematic reviews useful tools in their daily, day-to-day work. But of course, I have to point out to you that there are limitations when it comes to systematic reviews. The results may still be inconclusive, and there are times when there are no trials of evidence, or no trials available, or they're poor quality. And the intervention sometimes is just too complex to be tested by a trial. And the last point is very frustrating, that just because you've conducted a rigorous systematic review, practice and policy does not change just because you have the evidence. This is just an example. So if any of you start doing a systematic review and you think, wow, this is going to change practice or policy, don't be disheartened if it takes many, many years, because James Lind, he's often called the father of systematic reviews. He conducted systematic reviews, or he certainly did a trial on what was best for use if you have scurvy. So he did this trial. Use of citrus fruit was proven to prevent and cure scurvy in 1754. This is going back many, many years. But it was almost 50 years until the British Navy started using lemon juice in their British ships. So if you look at the table there, I quite like the idea that a quart of cider taken if you had scurvy showed minor improvement. But lots of other things, there was no improvement, no change whatsoever. But 2 oranges and a lemon, humble orange and a lemon, was a dramatic recovery. But obviously this has been known for many years now, and but it took 50 years before it became put into practice. Now I'm going to talk about some misconceptions around systematic reviews, and I'm quite sure that some of you might even have might ask questions related to certain issues when it comes to systematic reviews, whether it's true or false. So let's have a look at some of these misconceptions. It's been said that only randomized controlled trials can be used in a systematic review. This has been said for many years, and some people still kind of under the impression that you can only do a systematic review if you have randomized controlled trials. But if you think about it, lots and lots of subject areas, topic areas, using a randomized controlled trial is unethical. So the first picture here, the image here, is the title is "The Impact and Effectiveness of Support for People Bereaved Through Advanced Illness. How on earth can you use randomized controlled trials?" Here's another one, "Patterns of Skeletal Fractures in Child Abuse, a Systematic Review." So for certain, you can't use randomized controlled trials in that area. So there are lots of others here I've put up, but I'm quite sure some of you might even know of others where randomized controlled trials aren't the included studies, but they may be case control studies or non-randomized control studies. So this one, "Chronic mercury exposure and blood pressure in children and adolescents, a systematic review." So they didn't use a randomized controlled trials. So you can see that randomized controlled trials, you can't say that only randomized controlled trials are used in systematic reviews. So that sort of misconception is certainly false. Because when it comes to a systematic review, you need to include primary studies. So they could range from cross-sectional studies to case control studies. And often the case is that in some topic areas, some subject areas, especially when it comes to, for instance, public health, cohort studies are the ones that you'd be looking for. So this evidence pyramid just shows you different types of studies and which ones are most robust compared to the ones that are weak. Now, the second point is value only to assess the effectiveness of healthcare interventions. Well, currently, I know across Cardiff University, there are various schools who've got nothing to do with the healthcare. They're involved in doing systematic reviews. So look at this title. How well do activity monitors estimate energy expenditure? A systematic review and meta-analysis of the validity of current technologies. So that's got nothing to do with healthcare interventions. Here's another one, relationship between motor proficiency and academic performance in mathematics and reading. You know, that's education. Here's the one about, are we failing young people, not in employment, education, and so on. So that's got nothing to do with healthcare interventions. And here's quite a topical subject. When do climate policies work? Well, you know, that's not effectiveness of healthcare interventions. I think this kind of misconception is around only because the first ever systematic reviews related to healthcare interventions, you know, due to Cochrane reviews being the first ever systematic reviews. But certainly it's a false misconception. It's false that, you know, a systematic review's value only can be assessed to healthcare interventions. So this list here just gives you other reviews you can look at that, you know, certainly relates to other topic areas and not just health. Third point here is systematic reviews involve statistical synthesis. Well, this is where the confusion with meta-analysis comes into being. There are two approaches to synthesizing findings from a range of studies. You can do a narrative synthesis where the findings are summarized and explained narratively in words, or quantitative synthesis where they are statistically gathered and synthesized, where you would have a meta-analysis. And this just to show you a forest plot where if you were doing a meta-analysis, you'd have one of these diagrams. But otherwise, you can certainly do a systematic review where you gather your evidence and you write it narratively, and you probably will have tables to explain them as well. So that's a false misconception that, you know, that involves statistical synthesis. A substitute for doing good quality systematic review, a substitute for doing good quality individual studies? Well, not really, because often when you do a systematic review, you realize that they need to do further research is required in a certain topic area, or they need high quality studies. You may find lots of studies, but they may have lots of bias in them, and you may need high quality studies. And in some cases, the studies may have no scientific basis. So, you know, this is just to show you that, you know, doing a systematic review isn't a substitute for doing good quality individual studies. Really, you know, review sometimes to find out what is out there, and that you need to do further research. So you need to conduct good quality trials, good quality studies in that topic area. So this, you know, again, this misconception is false, really. And I know that, you know, in many research funding organizations now, that if you want to do a primary study, they would first ask you, have you conducted an evidence review? Have you done your systematic review to see what's out there, what's available, what's needed to be done? So systematic reviews are important. Okay, now this is something that lots of researchers, academics are forever thinking about. You know, can they be included? Can systematic reviews be included in the REF, or the Research Excellence Framework? Well-conducted systematic reviews are REF returnable, and they've got to be well conducted. The review's got to be published in a high-impact journal, and it's really important that the abstract is clear and structured and is accurate. Actually, you know, to be honest, this is important when it comes to any paper, that, you know, the abstract is what's read first, and sometimes people don't even read the whole paper, they would just look at the abstract. So it's really important that you check the abstract, and your abstract is accurate and is written in a way that is understandable and it gives a good impression. Also, it's really important that the text clarify major significance of the review question. does your review, would it impact nationally? Would it impact internationally? It's important thinking through these things when you are writing a systematic review. Is it, is your review going to have a global impact? Is it going to have a national impact? Is it going to have any impact at all? So it needs to be, needs to be clear about those points. And also the methodology needs to be rigorous. So you need to follow a accepted, rigorous methodology to do your systematic review. So basically, it's false to say they cannot be included in the research excellence framework. Systematic reviews, if they're well conducted, they are returnable. Right, number 6 here, the 6th point is a systematic review appropriate as a part of a PhD or MSc project? Now, this is a little tricky here because the first point there, systematic reviews should be conducted by a team. And when it comes to a PhD or an MSc project, they should be the results and the work of the candidates, it should be the candidates' independent work. You can't expect a team to be involved in doing your review. But currently, lots of people are doing MSc projects and PhD projects where they're doing a systematic review as part of their PhD or their MSc. And it's perfectly all right as long as most of the work is conducted by the candidate themselves, but you would have your supervisor or another colleague checking the stages of the systematic review which is needed to be conducted independently by another person, another reviewer. So, but your work as a candidate, a PhD or MSc candidate, the work's got to be your work. You're the, if you're going to have your work published, you're the first author, primary author, and you're responsible for what you're doing. But it can be, you can have a second reviewer helping you just to check to see, whether you're on the right path, as it were. Okay, so I know some people might have questions related to the PhD MSc project, but recently there was a brilliant paper relating to the fact that every postgraduate student should attempt to do a systematic review because it helps you to understand research methodology in a way maybe you might have not up until now. Okay, now here we are, we're going to talk about steps to conducting a systematic review. Before you even think about, doing your review, you need to realize, is the review required? So you can check the Cochrane library where there are all the Cochrane reviews, but obviously all those reviews are relating to, they're all intervention reviews relating to a treatment or other. And then Campbell Library where they have reviews relating to education and crime and so it's kind of social science areas. And then there is NICE website. You can look to see what evidence reviews they've conducted. And you can check NIHR, Health Technology Assessment website to see what reviews have been conducted there. And you can also do a quick PubMed search under your topic area to see has somebody else done a review relating to your subject area, what you're wanting to do a review on. So before you proceed, you need to check, is a review required? And of course, one of the most important places to check is Prospero, where review protocols are registered, just to see whether similar question to the question you're thinking about has been, is ongoing or has been conducted. And then your step 1 is to get your team together. So the team needs to have a range of skills, obviously an expert in the relevant clinical topic area, someone who's got expertise in systematic review methods, an information specialist, someone who could be involved in the information retrieval. And if you think your review is going to involve meta-analysis, it's really important having a statistician on board. And if you're looking at cost and cost effectiveness, obviously a health economist would be a great help. And if your review relates to qualitative research methods, a qualitative researcher would be a good person to have. And nowadays, that if you're doing a systematic review, you know, a lot of organizations expect you to have people and patients involved, so people and patient involvement. But of course, I have to mention here that if you are doing your systematic review as part of your MSc or PhD, you just have to be careful, you know, what range of skills you're going to get involved in your team. But you would still need at least one other person to review what you're doing and to be part of your team. Now, review protocol. Review protocol would have these headings on it, and every systematic review should have these headings. Just like any other research, piece of research, you need an introduction and so on, and methods, and then there are certain stages: study selection, quality assessment, data extraction. Those stages are the ones that needs to be done independently in duplicate, as part, you know, with your team. And it's really important to start writing your review protocol at the outset. Review protocol is like, you know, the image there is of a plan of an extension, you know, so in a way, your systematic review protocol is a bit like that. It is like a plan for building. And sometimes if you don't have a good building there, a good plan there to help you through, you know, you're going to be in trouble just as if you didn't have a plan if you're doing an extension. And your review protocol need to be reported according to PRISMA P, and you can get it published in a journal. But the most important thing here I want to point out to you is register your protocol with Prospero. So anybody else wanting to do a systematic review in that topic area will know that, you know, somebody else somewhere else in the world is doing one. So they need to change their question. So they need to be aware what's happening. So from the very start, transparency is the key word for doing systematic reviews. That you need to be transparent. You need to register your protocol. And registering your protocol in Prospero is just an online exercise, and it's very easy to do. And currently there are journals who wouldn't publish your review unless you've had it registered in Prospero. So, you know, it's really important you register your protocol, your systematic review protocol in Prospero. This sort of slide just shows you some of the freely available systematic review methodologies. So these are all online and available free. So, you know, they're easy to follow and important to use. So it's really important you follow a systematic review methodology when you're doing your review. Step three is defining the question. So this is the first and the most important decision. Your question is like, you know, I've referred to the protocol being a plan of the house. Defining the question is really like the foundation. Everything else is built on that question, and it guides the rest of the review. And for somebody reading your systematic review, it determines to the end user the relevance for them. So I would say to you, take adequate time to draft and discuss your question with your co-reviewers, or if you're doing an MSc, PhD, with your supervisors. It's really important defining your question and getting it right. You know, because in the past, I've done systematic reviews where the question was just not, possibly we didn't think through the question well, and the whole review start falling apart then. So, you know, it's really important getting your question right. So when it comes to types of questions, you know, there are background questions where you would say, what do I know about this topic area? Why do people get asthma? This, you know, those kind of questions can be answered through textbooks, and even obviously some people will go online on the internet to look for answers. But when it comes to systematic reviews, you need foreground questions. So you need to formulate a clear, well-defined research question of appropriate scope. And there are tools available. So, you know, it depends on the kind of question. So here are some of the tools, and there are so many more than this, but I've just got these four formats on the screen here. Obviously, PICO, some of you are, I'm sure, familiar with, as well as SPICE and SPIDER. So, you know, they're for different questions. So if your questions relating to an intervention, a review relating to an intervention, PICO would be the perfect format to use. But if it's, for instance, SPIDER would be good if you're looking at something, a question that is qualitative question. But these tools are available to help you to develop your question. And of course, there are times when, you know, none of these tools would fit your question. So please don't get in a state about it then, but just try and work out the different concepts within your question. There are many systematic reviews I think I've done over the years where I think, oh, none of these tools are going to help me. But, you know, just work out the different concepts within your question, and that's the way forward if you can't fit it into one of these formats. This slide just gives you an idea of what kind of questions, how you can begin your question, and the different concepts within the question. Okay, step 4 when it comes to doing a systematic review is designing the search strategy. So a well-constructed search strategy is the core of your systematic review. So this is one of the important building blocks in your systematic review. So your research question will inform the designing of the search strategy. And your search strategy needs to have keywords and index terms. It needs to have synonyms and different spellings, and Boolean operators should be used within that search strategy. And some of you might think, what is a Boolean operator? Well, you know, you'd use it every day. And in a minute, we'll go on to talking a little bit more about Boolean operators. Wildcards and truncation, proximity and adjacency, and setting limits. So all these headings here are important when you are developing designing and developing a search strategy. Yeah, so when it comes to index terms, subject terms, it helps you to focus on the terms you need to use. Some of you probably heard of medical subject headings or mesh headings. So when I refer to subject terms or index terms, what I'm talking about here is, you know, in some ways, in some cases, people call them medical subject headings, and other times they call them index headings or subject headings or thesaurus headings. So that's what I'm talking about. Index headings that are being used, that are being developed within various databases. So you need to identify your key concepts and topic areas. And the frustrating thing is they vary between databases. So if you start using one database and you think, oh great, I've got my subject headings here or my index headings, those headings might differ in another database. And a keyword, you need to think of all the keywords. So if you were looking at, if your subject was something to do with cancer, you need to think of all the other words relating to cancer. So a subject heading for cancer is neoplasm. So in your search strategy, you would have the term neoplasm as well as the word cancer. And then you need to think of all the other keywords such as tumors and whatever else there is. You need to think of every keyword you can think of, you know, that relates to that topic, that search terms. Okay, so Boolean operators, as I said, you know, you and I use Boolean operators every day. If you're on the internet, for instance, you're looking for a holiday. Well, I guess none of you would be looking for holidays at the moment, maybe, but, you know, you think, yes, you know, cheap flights and Greece or Spain and beach or whatever. So you use Boolean operators whenever we use the internet. So when it comes to search strategy, developing a search strategy, you'd be using Boolean operators. So this example here, alcohol and drugs. So if I search for alcohol and drugs, just as it is on the screen there, I would find articles related to alcohol and drugs. So that article would contain both those terms, alcohol and drugs. But if I were to add the Boolean operator or, I would find many, many more articles relating to alcohol or drugs or higher drugs, or, you know, so or is always more. So, and not, you know, if I search alcohol, not drugs, I wouldn't find articles that contain anything to do with drugs, but just the term alcohol. This slide just gives you an example from an Ovid Medline Ovid databases where, Wildcards and Truncation. So this is just an example. For instance, if you were to use the term manage with the asterisk, M-A-N-A-G asterisk, it would retrieve for you all those words underneath there. So all those words, manage, managers, manager, etc., would be retrieved for you. But if you were to add a number in, it would only find for you the word home, asterisk, and within one. So it'll only within just one digit. So it would be just the term home or homes. And color is it's the word color there and the question mark. It would, find for you the missing digit. And same as with the hashtag and the word woman or women, you would find. But remember, this is only in Ovid interface. So if you were searching certain databases on the Ovid platform, you can use these, but other platforms have different wildcards, or some of them, they don't have wildcards. But one good thing is the truncation symbol asterisk is universal. You can use it in whether you're using a nursing database or whether you're using a medical database or a business database, whichever database, the truncation symbol asterisk is fine for throughout all the databases. Yes, proximity and adjacency. It's finding words that are nearer to each other, or like you can see that the last couple of sentences there, the word must be within 3 of each other or in any order. So if I were to put asthma, ADJ3 inhaler, it would find for me articles that talked about an inhaler for asthma or using an inhaler for moderate asthma. And of course, when it comes to proximity and adjacency symbols, again, they differ from one database to another. So ADJ is used within Ovid interface, near or N is used within Synal, and within sometimes is used within Synal as well as Scopus, for instance, one of the other databases. So this is a frustration I think we all have, that, that these symbols, they differ from one database to another. But thankfully, when it comes to synonyms and spellings, remember, when you're developing your search strategy, use any synonyms and acronyms. And remember spelling and also using hyphenated and non-hyphenated words. Oh yes, so the flags there to show you, often American British spelling differs, and we need to remember, where to add our wildcard if we're doing, for instance, pediatrics or pediatrics. So you have to be careful there. So also when you're developing your search strategy, you can add up what we call a search design filter or quality filter, or they're also known as search hedges. These filters help you to find specific study designs. So if you only wanted to find randomized controlled trials, you'd be able to find a validated search filter that you could add to your subject terms, and that would then retrieve for you just randomized controlled trials or observational studies or whatever the search filter you're wanting. But the links there, you can go to those sites and have a look. Inclusion exclusion criteria helps to set boundaries for the systematic review. And they're very, it's really important that as you're developing your search strategy, you know what your inclusion exclusion criteria is. So here you need to take into consideration, when you're talking about a child, what age group, publication date. A systematic review should be conducted to the inception of the databases. So that means if it's a healthcare medical topic, you can go back as far as 1946. So whatever you write in your systematic review, you have to have a rationale behind why you're doing what you're doing. So if you say, I've only searched back to 1965, you need to give a reason as to why that is the case. And of course, in many cases now, people are looking at medical technologies, for instance, they might have not been established until the 1980s or something. So in that case, you can say, because that date when that medical technology came into being was 1985 or whatever. So you can set your date as that. And of course, there are geographic locations. Sometimes you only want to look at studies published in, OECD countries, or you only want to look at studies relating to British Isles, so you can have geographic locations as well. Yeah, so this slide just shows you that, when it comes to age group, there's a huge difference. You can look at alcohol misuse amongst children, but when you say children, do you mean, toddler age group, or do you mean somebody who's 18 years old? Or when you talk about elderly people, do you mean somebody in their 60s, or are you referring to somebody in their 80s? So it's really important when you are developing your research question and considering your inclusion-exclusion criteria that, you really clarify what do you mean by children. If it was to do with children, if it's to do with elderly people, what age are you referring to? So when it comes to sources to search, databases to search, for a systematic review, it's important that you search some general databases and specialist databases, and also grey literature. So here we've got a set of databases. These are, general databases such as ASIA, which is a social science database. And then there's MBase, which is relating to healthcare interventions and drugs, and Medline, the first and the foremost important database when it comes to healthcare literature and medical literature. But if you're looking at, for instance, say your review related to elderly carers or something, then it'd be a good idea searching a specialist database alongside those general databases. So AgeLine is a database where they have articles, literature relating to elderly people, everything to do with elderly and older people. For instance, if you're looking at you're looking to do a systematic review relating to education, ERIC is a database that's to do with education. So it's important that you use, a specialist database alongside your general database, and then some grey literature as well. So a good search strategy, objective of a systematic review search strategy is twofold. It's supposed to be sensitive to capture all the studies for potential inclusion, and specific to exclude irrelevant studies. And of course, no search strategy will be 100% sensitive or specific, but your aim must be to get it nearest to it as possible. So even some of us has been developing search strategies for many years. Even we miss out things, or we lose things, but our aim is always to be 100% sensitive and specific. So here I would say to you, go and talk to your librarians. They're meant to be there to help you. They're your friends. They won't say shush to you anymore. They'll welcome you and help you. So they'll be brilliant in helping you to develop your search strategy. And they know the healthcare resources, so they'll be able to say to you, these are the relevant database for your topic area. So whichever topic area you're working in, go and see your librarian. They'll be able to help you. And it's really important that we keep a documentation of our searches. So this is where, again, the word transparency is important, that you need to keep a record of the date of your search, the sources you've searched, number of hits, and details of your search strategy, the search process. And it's really important keeping a record using a PRISMA flow diagram, because you will need to publish that, include that in your publication. Step 5 is study selection, and it's important you use reference management like EndNote or Zotero, whichever you prefer. First of all, you do your study selection. First stage is looking at title and abstract, and the second stage is full text. So this is where you need another reviewer to help you. So if you're involved in doing a PhD or an MSc project, this is where another colleague could help you, and they could be an author on your review. But if it's a supervisor, they can just check 10-20% of what you've done, just to make sure that you're both on the right track. So this slide just gives you the benefits of reference management, but I'm not going to go through it all, but it's there for you. Step 6 is critical appraisal and quality assessment. When it comes to doing critical appraisal, we are saying, what is this paper about? Do I trust it? What are the results? Is it relevant for my research question? And you're trying to detect risk of bias. So this is another stage where you need somebody independently in duplicates to reduce error and bias. So again, a supervisor could do 10–20%, or if you have another colleague, they could do similar. But you will be the person leading it. And why do we do critical appraisal? Well, not all evidence is equal. I hate saying that, but not all evidence is equal. Many papers published in medical journals have potentially serious methodological flaws. And you may read the abstract, and the abstract may have, be saying one thing to the main body of the paper. The figures might be wrong. So it's really important that we quality assess each and every paper that you're going to include in your review. And of course, to do critical appraisal, you need common sense, but along that, though, there are simple checklists. A range of them are available, whichever types of studies you use. And I think the next slide gives you links to where you can find critical appraisal checklists. Step 7 is data extraction. So again, here, every data extraction form differs from another, and your data extraction form is informed again by your question. So this is why developing a question, a rigorous question, is really important. And this step is another step that you need your second reviewer, you need your buddy to help you with independently in duplicate to reduce error and bias. And it's really good that you develop and test the form at the very beginning, so you know what you're looking for and what you should be looking for. But every data extraction form has a general set of information, but then underneath that are things that are very different because every research question differs from another. Step 8 is data synthesis. Aim of data synthesis in a systematic review is to collate and summarize the results of included primary studies. So you could do a narrative synthesis where you write narratively in words and include tables to explain how you gathered the evidence you have, or meta-analysis, or meta-synthesis where you're looking at qualitative studies, qualitative research, or mixed methods. And this is just a slide to show you what the evidence table could look like, and just as if you're doing a meta-analysis, another diagram of forest plot. So we're nearly there. Step 9 is report the findings. Provide a scientific rather than a subjective summary of the literature. It's really important that you interpret the results and identify limitations. It's better to be honest and transparent, and show where future research areas need to be looked at. So this is just the PRISMA statement, which will guide you through how to write the headings you need in your review, in your systematic review. Step 10, here it is. You think that's it, but it's not. Dissemination is really, beginning of another project for you in some ways, because making research available is not the end, but it's really the beginning. And this should be a planned and active process. So explore ways to aid the transfer of your research into practice. So how to choose these headings here will give you, how do you choose, which journals to publish in? So that slide would help you in that. But also, there are lots of other ways for dissemination. You can write blogs about your review. You can use the internet. You can use social media such as Facebook, Twitter, and so on to disseminate your findings. So in summary, when you're doing your systematic review, adhere to a strict design, therefore minimize the chance of bias. Summarize the evidence, it helps keep people up to date. A properly conducted systematic reviews provide the best quality evidence for decision making. This slide just gives you some sources that would help you, further reading really. So I've gone over my time, I think, a bit, but any questions now?
Hi, Mala. Thanks very much for your presentation. We've got time for one quick question. systematic review as part of a PhD, is it acceptable if only one person, i.e. a PhD student, does the scanning of databases and deciding on studies to be excluded? Does that introduce bias? How can we get around that?
When they say scanning of databases, I wonder whether they mean searching the databases.
Possibly,
so when it comes,
it's a written question, so it's difficult to understand the meaning.
Okay, I mean, they can further email me about it, but I would say if you're a PhD student or an MSc student, you're doing a systematic review, you can follow all the steps in a systematic review. Even if you didn't have a second reviewer, you can write it up saying the limitations of my review was that I didn't have an independent reviewer, doing the work with me, basically, that kind of thing, but you can do a systematic review as a PhD student or an MSc student.
Fab. Thank you very much, Mala. I know a few other people may have questions, and you've left your email there, so they can always contact you directly. I'd just like to thank everybody who attended this session this morning. We've had some nice comments already, and I want to thank Mala for her time this morning. I think it's been a really insightful presentation. Yeah, that's all from us this morning then. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.